Hanging with Higgins, where author and former prosecutor John J. Higgins interviews his intriguing guests about their lives, knowledge, experiences, and projects. Explore, learn, and be entertained. Come, join us now. Good evening, and welcome to Hanging with Higgins. I'm your host, John J. Higgins. Tonight, I have a new author who I met at a recent paranormal event, Robin Murphy, who has just come out with her book entitled Sullivan's Secret, with a second book soon to follow entitled Secret of the Big Easy, and a third book which will be entitled Federal City's Secret. Her website is located at www.robinmurphyauthor.com. That's www.robinmurphyauthor.com. Welcome, Robin. How are you today?
I'm doing great, John. How are you?
I'm fine. It's great to have you on here.
Thanks for having me.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, how far back do you want to go? I could bore you.
Start at the beginning.
Well, I did grow up in a small little coal mining town, Windber, Pennsylvania. And I'd say my childhood was pretty normal. I have two older brothers. And from there, I sort of have bounced around after I graduated high school. I had a job in ophthalmic associates. I was a medical secretary. Then I worked for a real estate company, and I kind of have bounced around quite a bit. But pretty much the role that I've played over the last 30-some years is an administrative assistant in all of these different areas. So
okay,
that's kind of where I'm currently. My day job is an admin over at Shepherd University in West Virginia.
Okay. Well, the administrative people generally run most things, right?
I like to think that. I don't let my bosses know that, but that's pretty much the truth, yes.
I found in my career those people were very helpful if you have a good one. If you don't have a good one, you've got your work is really cut out for you.
Exactly.
So, is there something in common you like doing in this administrative kind of role?
It's funny because over the years, with the different roles that I've had, I tend, and it's maybe a bad thing, I tend to get bored quickly. And I'm usually always searching for something new to learn. So it's good on one hand, but it can be bad on another, because if you're too bored, you can get into a lot of trouble. But over the years, I've learned, graphic design, website design, the administrative with doing all of the typing and the, document formatting. I think what it has done has brought me into the role that I am now with my writing, that I'm able to do all the things with creating my own website, the marketing, my platform, as well as formatting my books and originally, self-publishing them. So I think that's pulled it all together. It's funny, you look back at what you've done and you realize, oh, okay, this kind of makes sense. At the time, you didn't realize maybe why you were doing it or learning it, but I've been able to pull all of that knowledge and I'm able to do what I've done, today with my books.
Right. Well, yeah, that would be, very helpful experience with all the graphics and the, all the different software programs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
I remember when I first started, I worked in industry for a while, so I wasn't so much worried about writing documents in those days. But, when I got working in government, we went from IBM Selectric typewriters that were self-correcting or whatever to word processors and all of those kinds of things that have made, life so much easier when it comes to writing anything.
Yeah, it's interesting, the different personalities that I've met in the author world with folks that have not had any of that experience and have to pursue self-publishing for different reasons, kind of get into a panic because they don't have a clue, and it can be a little scary.
Well, it is. I mean, there's commonalities once you know one kind of system, but if you don't know any system,
absolutely.
Back in the day when I was, first in government too, it's like we were doing reports to the governor or the legislature, and back in those days, you had to have the document typeset. You'd go to a a place where they would set the type literally,
Wow.
and then they would print a proof. You had to, go through the proof,
Mm-hmm.
go back to them, and then they had to reset the type to compensate for any mistake. And today, all of that's all computerized.
Oh, yeah.
It's so much easier,
Different world.
Absolutely. So I'm always interested too in how people become writers, because it's like a different kind of personality, I think,
Yep.
that you have to succeed at that. So what were you like growing up that would have led you into like the writing field?
That's a good question. What I look back on that, because in 2006, 2007, I wrote my first book that literally came out of nowhere. I mean, I never started out to be a writer. I didn't plan, go to school for that. I just started writing. It was a romance.
Uh-huh.
And it kind of surprised me because I don't know where it came from. But growing up, I did stick to the mystery shows, and I was glued to the television a lot with that fantasy world, watching TV and cartoons. For some reason, Scooby-Doo comes to mind. That was a big deal for me. Loved Scooby-Doo. Okay. But, the mystery at that age, and then I did read a lot. I did do some Nancy Drew. I did have some of that type of, growing up reading a lot. And I just think that fantasy world, I kind of loved being there, but I never put it to pen. I never sat down and created my own world. And when this first book came out, I put it up on Lulu.com, and I think I sold 4 books, okay. One of them being mine. I purchased myself. And I discovered a romance online class, took it, and suddenly realized, wow, I need to pull that back off of Lulu. Okay. I think I had that talent. I had the creative, writing in me, but to put it into the storyline and properly do it, I needed a lot of work, and that kind of put me on the steamroll into doing Longridge Writers Group, which was an online course that I took. Okay. Actually got a few credits from that, and that really taught me. It's easy to say, oh, I can write that. I can write a book. Oh, I can do that, But once I sat down and realized what it really takes to put a story together, I really needed the training. And once I got that, right. Then these other books I was able to do those then.
Right. Well, that's kind of amazing. You say that all of a sudden this book kind of came to you. That's I think that does happen to a number of us. Mm-hmm. That there's, for me, everybody has said since my background I should be writing crime, not about angels. And it's been like, my explanation has been, but the angel story's in my way. Mm-hmm. I can't get to the crime stuff without telling this story first.
Exactly. Every writer, I have learned a great deal over the years and met some wonderful people and done a lot of conferences, workshops, you name it. And every writer, I feel, has their own way. I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to write. Some people say you've got to put 5,000 words a day, and you've got to do it this way. And I just feel, for me, if I put that kind of pressure on myself, I'm going to stare at the computer and do absolutely nothing. I can't do it that way. It's a complete natural process. And I even meditate a lot prior to my writing. I think it kind of opens me up and frees any other kind of outside noise, as they say, in your head, when you're writing. And right. It's kind of a natural process. And if there's something nagging at me, that you've got to do this, I think you've got to get that out of the way first and then move on. So I agree with that. And
it's interesting you say that too, because I'm also a Capricorn. I believe in a lot of that stuff, so you'll hear me, seed things with that. But, we're kind of supposedly ritualistic and, routine and all of those kinds of things. So the idea that you have to write a certain number of words a day would appeal to that side of me, but that's not the way I operate.
Yeah.
And, there are days that, I just feel like I can't write. It's not coming, and it's just frustrating trying to do that. But what I do know is that when I'm in those time periods, the story is still percolating back in my unconscious.
Yeah.
So when I do sit down to write, a lot of the problems that I would have that I couldn't get, beyond a few days before, all of a sudden I have the answer to.
Absolutely. That's kind of how I work too. I know there are times, for some reason, I don't know why Sunday mornings have become this normal morning for me to get up and write, but there have been times when that doesn't happen that way, and my husband will ask, did you write today? And it's like, no, and I used to beat myself up for that. I used to what's wrong with me? I haven't touched this story for, a couple of weeks, and and then I finally said, okay, I've got to really stop doing that to myself, because a lot of times it is figuring out the next scene. It's just not ready yet, so I do a little bit of outlining, but I'm more of a pantser, I think. I've got the book in my brain. I know how it's going to be. I've sort of got the beginning, middle, and end, but all that stuff in between just kind of comes to me, So I think everybody just has to find their own way,
Right. Well, I'm very much the same way. I'll do some rough outlines sometimes. Like when I was writing the angel stories, part of the problem was I had to create the heavens, because and I've said this many times, is that if I say to you, what is heaven? It's a nice place with clouds, everybody's happy,
right.
And then so I was kind of stuck when I was trying to develop that world. So I really had to just take some time and figure out what the physical part of that would be. And once I basically wrote what I call like a crypt sheet with all of that information in it, then it made me able to move forward.
Right.
And I had to get through that like section. And the other thing I find sometimes is when I'm writing, I'm like written up to chapter 15. I should be writing chapter 16, but 16 isn't coming. But chapter 80 is.
Right. Yes.
So I'll jump ahead and I'll do 80.
Yeah.
Because it's there.
It is frustrating, because I know people say, do you have writer's block? And I don't really know if it's actually a block, but maybe it is that feeling of just, okay, it's not coming to me. So I have found that if I go back to the beginning of the story I'm writing and reread it, it kind of brings me back to that place. Sometimes then I'm able to carry on, and continue. Sometimes I'll just pick up another book that I'm reading, another author, and just getting into the mode of reading. And then that flow kind of gets you, maybe it's that creative side of your brain starting to percolate. Again. Yeah, and then you can get into it. But there are times where I'm at this point and it's like, I know I should be doing something, but what's popping into my brain is the ending, of revealing the murderer, so to speak. So, yeah, and sometimes they tell you to just write that. They tell you, go ahead and write that chapter maybe, or that section. Once you get it on paper, then you can come back and continue where you're at,
Right, or you can modify it if all of a sudden something leads a little bit to the side, but before you get back to where 80 should be.
Right.
But, I think that, like you say, I think we all have to have our own, we have to become familiar with our own style and what we're comfortable with in terms of doing that. For me, I find that writing itself is basically meditative. I absolutely lose track of hours of time.
Yes, I think all authors, I know that I've listened to interviews and met that when I'm done, you feel like you could run a 10K. You've got so much, you're just so excited, and I always get so pumped up when I'm done with it. It's the greatest feeling in the world. And I used to question when I first started doing this, is this what I'm supposed to do? And then when I would finish that day of writing and you're up there on cloud 9, it's like, okay, yeah, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I wouldn't feel this great if it wasn't,
Well, it was meant to be.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
I agree with you, and I was trying to when I retired. Of course, I didn't really want to go and start defending criminals since I've been putting them away for so long. But I had a boss that wanted me to come help on a case, and so I figured, well, maybe I can do both things. But the train or maybe the left side, right side brain issue, I don't know what it is. I just could not do law and write novel at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It just did not work well together at all. So it's and I find that writing the novel just feels so much more rewarding to me.
Yeah.
That it's creating something out of nothing.
Exactly.
And I don't know how you are with your characters, but I see my characters.
Mm-hmm.
I put a scenario together, and the characters interact. They kind of write their own dialogue.
Yeah. That's every writer has their strong points, their weaknesses, and my strength has been the dialogue. I don't really understand why it's so easy for me to do, but and my husband says, because I like to talk a lot, so maybe that's true. And I actually do. I admitted one time on another interview that I had done that I actually do talk to myself a lot. So it's maybe just a natural thing that these characters, have their own personalities, and it's such an easy thing for me to write about and do. And I think it's fun because you do lose yourself, and when you're doing that, I think that reflects for your readers. I think, whenever it's a natural thing, that's what you want to do. You want to pull them in and for them to feel for your characters. So that's always been a fun part for me.
And I think when you do it that way too, there's a genuineness to the voice itself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I think that's anything that helps make the characters real or the environment they're in real, I think is I don't know, to me that's miraculous that we're even capable of doing that.
Yeah, it is. I've had a lot of people say that. The first book, when I had finally done Sullivan's Secret, it was picked up by a small press, which was a thrill for me. And when we had gotten it published, I really held it close to the vest. I didn't have anyone read it, review it, any of those things. And I remember my husband, when he read it the first time, he was out on our back porch, and he probably had gotten through the first 5 or 6 chapters. And he walked in, and he was a little emotional, and he said, I can't believe this is you. Like, where did this come from? He was completely blown away, which as a writer is a very cool thing. That's like, okay, it's coming across the way it's supposed to. So I've had other people, say the same thing that know me personally. Wow, like I had no idea. And in a way I didn't either. That's kind of how my whole writing began. So yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yeah. I think I'm the same way. Sometimes I read what I've written and I'm going, where did that come from?
Yeah. And it does come across. If you're not in the mood to write, I won't do it because it is going to come across that way. And I've had times where I'm on a flow and I've either got something really funny that a character has said or, and if I find myself laughing or any emotion is coming through, it's kind of like, okay, I've hit the nail here. I've done this right. So, yeah.
Yes. No, that's very true. Well, I had a similar experience when I was writing the Angel thing, of course. I was sitting here writing, and I have a girlfriend and who really wasn't into angels or reading that kind of thing. But I got kind of desperate. I was like, you know what, I'm afraid I'm just wasting my time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's somewhat complex. The names are not easy when you get into the angelic realm, and can you follow the character from one to the other? And I probably had 100 pages, already down, and I asked her, please look at this and tell me what you think. And within 3 days she was caught up to me looking for more.
Yeah.
So it was like, well, then I'm doing something that it's working.
Exactly. Yeah, it's funny because I don't think there's a writer out there that doesn't hold that book, that story personal. I mean, and I had a hard time putting it out there was very scary. My husband said, look, if this is what you want to do, and you've got to be able to get a thick skin, you've got to be able to handle, because you'll get critics, you'll get reviews, you get some folks that just don't get it, or, and that's a scary thing. But over time, I was able to get over that, because getting some professional reviews that were giving me 5 stars, it was kind of like, okay, this isn't my mom or dad telling me,
right.
good job.
Right.
It was some complete stranger that said, wow, I love this book, or, you really, when's the next one, kind of a thing. So, it's just something that my husband says, writers, that's why they write. It's all in your head, and you got to get it out there,
Yeah, it feels natural
when
you do that. The other thing that's kind of amazed me is that, I've always been kind of more of a low-key kind of guy. I had cases I could have been in the middle of the front page of the newspaper with or whatever. Mm-hmm. I generally handled things quietly. It was more my style.
Yeah.
And then when it came to like promoting these books and whatever, I was saying, oh my God, I'm going to cringe that I have to do this. But you know what? I'm fine with it. It's like I'm proud of those books, mm-hmm. and it's like I call it like a baby. It's like a child that you have, and you get protective of it, and you at least for me, I talk about it as I need to. And there's nothing to be ashamed of with it.
No.
And if people like it, they like it. If they don't, I understand that.
Exactly.
I've never liked everything I've read either, so I don't expect
exactly
I don't expect
true.
it to happen. Yeah, it's
I
fine.
think what helped me with the review process was you can go out there and any bestseller, Dan Brown, you name it, and you're going to see a lot of 1- and 2-star reviews. I mean, I don't care who you are, you're not going to please everyone. So I told myself finally, okay, first of all, I think I'm writing for me, because that's how it began. So you can't lose that. And then if anyone else out there enjoys it, well, then that's all the better. So if you can kind of ground yourself and remember that, anything else is gravy of who enjoyed it,
It's very true.
Yeah.
It's very true. And the other thing that I've been really pleasantly surprised with is that, again, we get in our own little communities or whatever, and, the prosecutorial world, we were dealing with a lot of stuff that we could never talk about outside of that world. Mm. So, that became a very small, closed-in kind of world. Mm-hmm. But when I finally went to my first writers' conference, I guess in the beginning of this month, and oh my God, Robin, I thought I was going to go and I was going to have all the English teachers there, lecturing on semicolons and colons, mm-hmm. and all of that kind of thing. But the nicest bunch of people. It was so refreshing to be talking to people that struggled with exactly the same stuff I struggle with.
Yeah, you're not alone. That is the one thing that I've learned too, that everyone is so very willing to help. Yes. And they've been there, they've been at that point, and it is refreshing to, and that's probably why I had written the first 3 books in this series, and I'm on the 4th one still, but the how-to book, my nonfiction book, was, like you said, nagging at me, because I felt that there is a bit of a prejudice to self-publishing. There's still that stereotype, there's those levels that you've got to be at this point in order to get a review written about you, or to be put on this site, or to have that, And I told myself, I need to put something together that puts all of the knowledge that I've learned and researched. It took me, years to research the things that I did, and I want to put it together so anyone starting out there that wants to self-publish can follow this book, and it's not as scary, and you can do it, a lot of things for free. You don't have to pay a ton of people or spend a lot of money to do the things that I've done to get your book out there. And once I did that and got it out there, it was kind of like, okay, that felt good. I was able to get that finished, and then now I'm able to work on the 4th book. So I wanted to kind of pay it forward, I guess, from the other people that helped me.
Well, and I think what you're saying is so true, is because it's, anybody who comes from, where you're writing a book, then the whole other level is getting the book out
Oh,
and,
yeah.
publishing. And that world is, I don't know, it just seems to be, I don't want to say flexible. It's just, it's not solid. It's
No.
shifting all the
Mm-hmm.
time.
Yeah.
And what one technique is, or one methodology is today, may be totally different, in a few weeks when they come up with a different format, or
Yes.
how they're going to do it, or a new website comes up, or
It's constantly changing.
whatever.
It is, and that's.
Yeah.
I had to weed out a lot of things. I wanted to share, helping people with, doing a synopsis or querying your publisher. I know I self-published the second and third book because I sort of surpassed my publisher on the first book, who has recently gotten out of the business, and I got the rights back. But you find yourself lost in that world of trying to push and sell and market and author platforms, and and it's then you sit back and you go, okay, when am I going to be able to write again? It can be frustrating. You kind of have to really put your time in where it's due, and kind of maybe have an even platform with time for writing, time for marketing, that sort of a thing. So it's not easy, and I think everyone needs to find that their best way or their process to do it, and
Right.
And don't be afraid to ask for help, because there are a lot of great people out there that are willing to do so.
Right. Well, and I think things, I know the big publishers will probably always exist. I wouldn't say that they're going to disappear or whatever, but I think the model is just changing so much that authors, unless you're really a big name, you really do have to do so much of your own,
Absolutely.
Promotional work. And then the harder part that's happening today is with, the normal bookstores are all disappearing.
Oh, my, yeah. It's kind of interesting what I've seen when I first began doing the self-publishing. And then I was reading a lot of authors who these publishing companies are disappearing. And then they're kind of like, okay, we're done. Here you go. And then they're like, oh, what do I do now? Do I self-publish? Do I find another publisher? It's kind of a scramble, and you find many different levels of writers out there, authors, that are trying to find their way, and it's not easy to stay on top of the best new thing. I find to the point where I'm on overload, and I can't take it all in. It's impossible to do so. I think that's the same with your author platform or your social media. You have to be careful on how much time you spend out there, because I don't think my Facebook business page sells a whole lot. I try to stress that you need to try to find readers or paranormal groups. In my instance, it's the paranormal realm. If you're following a ton of authors, they're plugging their books, so they're not really, reading yours. Some may, but not really, so
Right.
You kind of have to watch where you're at. Twitter's kind of the same way, although my recent publisher, Creativia, found me through Twitter, which was interesting. They just reached out to me, wanted to read my books, and they're now going to be publishing all 4 of them, so that's kind of exciting.
Yes.
But Goodreads is a good venue that brings readers and authors together, and that site's huge. I mean, you can do a ton of things out on Goodreads, but I think you have to be careful with being bogged down with all of those, the social media, because it can take up too much of your time.
Oh, I'm telling you, I've kind of bumped into that myself. I mean, it's because I didn't, I went to a small publisher, and they, were publishing my books, I guess, over the last 18 months. One came out, one right after the other. But I wasn't really a social media guy, because, of course, being a prosecutor, I was hidden.
Right.
I wasn't out in the front. I didn't want to be out in the front, so I had to change that. But the amount of time with the number of emails I get between, the Gmail accounts and the Twitter accounts, and then my normal, regular accounts that I had with signing up with different, blogs or newsletters or whatever. I can spend hours just sorting through what all the mail that I get, and a lot of it is important. It's not stuff that you should ignore, but it does, and it takes away from writing time.
It does. It's hard, and then working for me, still working full time, and I need to do my day job. It's even more difficult to squeeze all that time in, and because, like you said, the newsletters, you get some really great tips. Some really good other interviews that you're reading. You just don't know what you're going to pick up on that you're going to learn from.
Exactly.
But finding that time and kind of going through and finding which is the best way to put your time into that, it's difficult.
And my experience on Facebook has been similar to yours, is that, there's a lot of these author group pages or whatever, but they become like, is everybody shouting buy my book to one another? And it's like, well, that's kind of pointless to me.
It is. It really is. That's the hard part. I think the one thing that I struggled with, and I finally realized because other people have said this, that it's a very, very long, slow process. And that's, like creating your, finding a readership, finding a following, getting out there in the realm, which I finally realized where you and I met at that Paranormal Expo was, I realized, okay, I've got paranormal mystery series here, so you need to get out in that world and try to see who's out there. That's kind of what because I was going to these big book expos and a few author places that you've got all of these different genres out there that's just, it's too huge and you get lost.
Yes.
And mine's sort of a sub-genre. So you kind of really have to build on that. And it takes time. It's a slow deal, but just sticking with it and keep on writing. That's my phrase, my catchphrase. It's that you just got to keep on writing amongst all the other stuff, Well,
the encouraging things that I've seen, Jack Bruce just died, last week or something, and that was kind of my day, well, a little bit before my day, I guess. and the gentleman I talked to you about who had done the engineering work for Gladys Knight and the Pips, he was a really big fan, and so he was posting stuff on Facebook of Jack Bruce stuff, and as I'm looking, they've got like pictures of Jack Bruce and I guess the rest of Cream playing Union Catholic High School in 1968 in the gymnasium, and you sit there and you go, oh my God, well, I always thought that they just came on the scene and they were like, the Beatles overnight, and no, they were probably playing high school auditoriums, in another country touring.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the thing, because I get a little impatient at times, and, my husband always tries to calm me down a bit to say, now look, you just got to keep doing what you're doing, and don't get caught up in the fact that you feel like maybe you should be here or it's not happening in the time frame that you want. And you do realize that everyone started out that way, and whatever I'm supposed to be doing or where it's headed toward, I just have to, stick to it and not let that consume my thoughts as much as it does sometimes, And
it's hard not to, because, there's that fear level that you're just, spinning your wheels, and, you don't see the result.
Exactly.
I mean, I went from 6 Twitter followers a year ago in June. I'm up to, I think, a little over 25,000. But I'll go, I don't know what it means.
Yeah. Well, nobody does, because the people also that you look at your Twitter feed, that's impossible to read all the, because they're coming at constantly. And it's like, as soon as you're done reading one, you've got 50 more that just come up on the feed. And it's like, oh my gosh, I could spend a year and I would never get caught up on reading all of these tweets. So
Absolutely.
I don't know. In fact, I'm kind of blown away how my publisher found me. That I don't even know how that developed. I guess it's kind of like whatever's meant to be. It happened that way, because to sift through all of those, it's kind of tough. It's not easy.
Well, I use this thing called Hootsuite, and because what that will do, it will pull out when they're sending me a direct message.
I've heard of that, yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise I could never.
No.
I could never keep up with all of that. I mean, and with the social media thing, they'll say, well, this is social media, so you have to have all these conversations with all these people. And it's like, I can't have a conversation with 25,000 people no matter what I do.
Impossible.
Yeah. It's impossible. So, you need to kind of sort it out and then try to zero in as best you can.
Mm-hmm.
But the great thing about it is you do really get to meet so many fascinating people.
You do, and I think the one thing that I learned also when you're getting involved in that, like blogging, tweeting, all those things, you really don't want to spam them. You don't want to hammer them with this, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. That's just, because I get sick of seeing that. So what it is you need to develop your credibility. And I think that's why when I wrote this, the how-to book for rookie writers, the website developed out of nowhere from that. I didn't even plan that. It just came from the book. And it was kind of like, okay, I need to develop a credibility, let people know that I'm genuine and that I really do want to help other writers, other authors through my book or in other ways. And I actually have about 28 authors that signed up on my site to share their books. And I go out a couple of times a month and I share their information out on my social media platform. It's kind of like, they fill out a form, I put their books up there, and then I tweet about it, I put it out on Google, the Goodreads, all that, and I share that a couple of times a month. I can't do it, constantly because I'm doing enough for myself, but you kind of have to establish that credibility, and people then start to see that you're genuine. And then I think it kind of snowballs from there. It's a domino effect that when you're actually helping somebody, it's going to come back to you in some form. So it's a slow process. Yeah.
And like I said, that's what I really like about being around the other authors is that, you'd think that there'd be all this, zero-sum game, if they buy, my book, they're not going to buy your book or whatever. And really not like that at all.
No, they're not.
And that's really it's so nice to be in that kind of, environment.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And the one website I've never been able to figure out, maybe you can give me a few-minute quick sense of it, is Goodreads. It has to be the most unintuitive platform I have seen in my life. So I don't know whether, I have a mental block to it, but trying to follow those threads.
Yeah.
I just always scratch my head now. I have like 1,000 followers there that I don't know where they came from. I mean, they appear, they probably come off the Twitter feed somehow.
Yeah. Well,
but,
it's possible.
And I'm delighted I have them.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure what to do with them.
Well, if you created an author, like an author dashboard, and you
I have
all your books are up there. Yeah. I think it's just a matter of the way I use it are different events. You can use the events section. You can do giveaways. Giveaways are huge because you set that up. You depending on how many books you want to give away. Goodreads uses their algorithms to send out to the folks that are in that genre. You fill all that information out. And you'd be surprised when the people start signing up to join that giveaway. If they didn't win it, they're going to add your book to the list to buy it, to read it. Okay. It's another great way to get reviews because let's face it, that's huge. You need to have the reviews out there to build that readership following.
Sure.
So you can recommend your book. You can reach out. It's sort of a long process, but you do a search on the lists that are out there, the people that are actually in that genre. You know, you can do a search for paranormal or whatever your genre
romance,
is. Yeah,
sure.
And then you'll find all these people, you know, I mean, thousands and thousands of readers, and you kind of delve into what they've read, who they would maybe review, and see if they'd be interested. And then you kind of have to reach out to them and ask them if they wouldn't mind giving you an honest review, you know. And I've reached out to them, and you maybe want to do 20 of them. You may get 6 out of it, but whatever you get out of it is going to be worth your while to spend the time and do.
Right.
But it takes a lot of time, and I'm actually still learning a lot of it. You know, the Listopia is adding your books to the different books that are out there. That's pretty huge. And then I think whenever you post reviews yourself, after you've read something, people can see what you've read as well. You know, it's just it's kind of this relationship that you get with other people.
Yeah, well, I could tell. I mean, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of activity on Goodreads. It was just that, you know, every time I approached it, it was like, I got invited to some chat or something that somebody was doing, and I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what was going on. I was seeing messages to me. I didn't know how to respond.
I think it takes time. It's like do one thing at a time, you know, because it can get overwhelming.
Yes.
There's a lot out there.
But the great thing about this, because I worked in industry before I finally finished college and whatever. I also had the tendency of getting bored, and the great thing about this is it's almost impossible to get bored.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know, there's always something that one can learn.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. You know, you can learn from other writers, and even your readers. You know, the reviews that you receive, good, bad, or whatever. I always like to take whatever I can from that. If there's something that a reader maybe didn't get or couldn't understand or whatever it may be, I try to go back and think, okay, now, can I build on that? Can I improve that? Sometimes it's just somebody that just kind of like, okay, look, they just didn't like it, so you got to move on and forget about it. But you can learn from everything that you're involved with. So readers they're huge. They're important. And, you know, I think if you're trying to develop that group of readers, it's worth putting the time into it.
Right. Well, it is. It's like a writing muscle, you know.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I've had many bosses in my day, and some would be changing happy to glad and glad to happy, and then others would go through and what they would do and change, it absolutely improved whatever I had written.
Yeah.
And I'm always in awe of that.
Yeah.
If you can write it better than me, I'm right with you.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, when you're just changing nonsense, then I'm not paying attention.
Exactly.
To you.
Right.
But you know, because sometimes what you think is clear may not be clear at all, and I have a tendency, too, of always wanting to know if somebody's getting lost, where are they getting lost?
Yeah.
You know,
it's important to do the beta readers. You know, you've got people out there that, you know, you want to give them an advanced review copy to do that and kind of give you a feel. Now, you have to be careful, too, because you want to use people that you genuinely trust and that genuinely want to see you succeed. You know, sometimes a lot of people join these groups and it's just kind of a bashing, you know, and that's not healthy. I don't think that's good. So that's
insanity.
Yeah, it is. And some people do that, and I'm very selective with who I have read my books when I'm done. And one of them is my husband, because he's clearly not into the paranormal mystery at all. And he gives me that objective point of view that he'll read something and say, okay, this doesn't make sense. What are you talking about? You know, and it's very helpful to have someone like that, because he's going to be brutally honest. That's what you want, you know.
Right.
And he's open.
Well, they could be honest. They don't have to be brutal.
Right. Exactly. He's very careful in that way, but he's come up with some really good points that I'm like, wow, okay, I didn't see that, you know, and it's made the book better. So. And I think everyone needs help that way, I think, you know.
Oh, well, we all do.
Yeah.
I mean, you get too close to the thing yourself, and, I know for myself when I have to reread my own stuff, my brain goes numb.
Yeah.
So, eventually I see the whole sentence or the whole paragraph. I don't see the one, the one mistake that's within it.
Exactly.
But it's funny, like you say that about the groups. When I was initially looking for an agent, I eventually just skipped over that because I figured, well, I can read a contract better than they can. But it was this one agent out of the Southwest somewhere said that, don't even think of approaching him until you give your books to your worst enemy, and they, tear the book apart and all. And I'm going, oh my God, why would you ever do that to yourself?
No.
And
it's
at
true.
the end of the day, he works for you.
Exactly.
You don't work for the agent; it's the other way around.
I tell you, I don't have an agent. I never tried to find one. I don't know why, other than probably because everything that I've done on my own is pretty much what the agent can do for you.
Right.
It's and it is a real. You really have to mesh. You have to blend really well, and that's not easy to do. With this, same with an editor. People that pay people for editing. I never had the money to pay an editor. It's very, very pricey, but I do know that that's also something. I've had a lot of people that said, I fired my, first two editors, or that, they just didn't get along or didn't see eye to eye, and that's not an easy thing to find either. So this latest publisher that I've hooked up with has a professional editor, and actually gave me quite a nice compliment that they said, it was great. It's great working with a professional writer. They had very minimal things that they found, but they still found something. There's always, and all it's going to do is make it better. So that's worked well, but they didn't try to change my voice. They didn't try to change my story.
Absolutely.
And you have to be very, very careful with that, because you bump heads with somebody that's trying to change your complete story around. Don't go with them. It's not worth it.
Well, I've always figured they're supposed to be fans of yours. If they're not in some kind of fan relationship with you, then you've got the wrong people. You've got to find the people who really like your stuff.
Exactly.
And you sit and I think of all the different things I've read in my day. Ernest Hemingway writes so much different than Tolstoy, or Anne Rice writes so much different than Defoe, or whatever. And they all have their pluses and minuses. And you really want the people who really want to make you succeed. And even when people give me stuff to read or critique for them, I never try to change their voice. I always try to clarify something where I think it's confusing. But it's their baby.
Yeah.
And I think you have to respect that.
Yeah. It's a very fine line with that, and you have to be able to take the critique to a degree. You have to be able to handle that if somebody finds something that maybe isn't making sense, but at the same time, you don't want to change, because, you put it on paper for a reason. You had this way of writing, the style, the characters, everything. And when someone's coming in and starting to really hack away at it and completely changing, you just maybe want to rethink that, editor and or agent even,
Yes. Well, I know when I was starting to write, too, it's like, I love how J.K. Rowling, she's got a beautiful writing style. She really does. Anne Rice does as well. And, I found that I'm not a flowery writer.
Yeah.
That's just not,
and that's okay.
not the way I do
exactly.
it. I'm more of an Ian Fleming kind of guy. It's like bump, bump, bump.
Yeah.
And it's like, and trying to change that would be, that'd just be torture. And I don't think it would work, because it's not your voice.
The rule of thumb that I learned in my writing course, and it is very true, is that you should write what you love to read. There is a reason for the draw that you have for who you like to read. And not that you're copying a style, but there is sort of, we sometimes do mimic the people that we like to read. Now, on the other hand, the flip side of that, for me personally, I like to stretch my muscles and read something completely off the wall, somebody that I've never read, and try to learn different ways of writing because I think you become better at that as a writer. You know, when
Sure.
you've got to read, you read a lot constantly, and try different authors and try to learn from them in different ways. You may not be writing that way or their style, but I think it helps me stretch myself because I know the second book of my series was very dark and darker than what I'm even used to writing, although I'm drawn to that kind of genre with, you know, movies and so forth. And it was interesting because my parents read the first book. My mom loved it. She read the second book, and it scared the crap out of her. She told me, oh, that was too dark, you know, and I said, well, that's okay. That's cool because it was supposed to be. And even for me writing it, because, you know, I'm talking satanic,
Right.
you know, occults and doing all of that I'm researching this stuff and I'm scaring myself, you know, researching it. And you're writing it and you're kind of like, wow. But I had to stretch myself, kind of push it because it was something that I wanted to try and do. And when it came off the way it did, and a lot of people said, whoa, you know, I loved the story. It was dark. It was, you know, then I knew I kind of was able to get that across. Now, my husband, of course, told me I'm going to have to sleep with one eye open here now because he kind of got a little frightened on what I had going on in my mind. But so, yeah, I think reading different types of authors, you know, but there's also a certain genre that maybe you're stuck to that if you love it, I think that's probably how you're going to be able to write as well, you know.
Right. Well, I kind of trust my unconscious mind. Has this tendency of picking up a lot of things and putting it through. I saw this movie the last week called Beautiful Creatures. I don't know if you saw it, but I normally wouldn't have watched it. It's like a teenage vampire-y kind of movie.
Okay.
But the dialogue in there was exquisite. It was just, you know, your jaw kind of dropped when the characters were doing their thing. And it was really big names in there, like Jeremy Irons and, you know, whoever Branagh's ex-wife was. I can't think of her name. So it wasn't like a B-rated movie, you know what I mean? It was like top-notch. But, you know, when I see that kind of thing, and then I think we do unconsciously try to absorb what we can and, you know, kind of put that in.
Well,
but I wanted to make sure we had a little bit of time for you to talk about your books.
Okay.
Because believe it or not, we're 50-some-odd minutes in. So, and I want you to be able to discuss your books.
Sure. Well, the series is it's a paranormal mystery series. First book is Sullivan's Secret. It takes place on Sullivan's Island, South Carolina. And the basis is my main character. She is a veterinarian, and she has these psychic abilities that are creeping up on her later in life. She had the same things going on when she was a young child, but she kind of squelched them, tucked them away. And then finally it's coming back to her, and she can't really ignore it. So as that's kind of developing again, she also has an interest in ghost investigating. So she and her best friend, Gail, they co-found the SIPS team, which is the Sullivan's Island Paranormal Society.
Okay.
And they go out and do their ghost investigations, but Marie pulls in some of her psychic ability on those investigations, along with then you've got the murder taking place on the island. And she kind of helps, I pull all of that in together to help solve the crime. The second book is kind of the same way, but they're in New Orleans. And, of course, you've got that taking place with the occults. And you've got a little bit of demon taking place. There's a demon involvement. And then the third story, they're in, you know, D.C. doing a ghost investigation. And a woman pulls them in for this investigation, but she also has some ulterior motives because her daughter's been kidnapped. And she's kind of asking for some help and Marie's guidance with her ability. And through the stories, Marie is growing in her ability. She's accepting it. She's kind of learning to have new things take place, as well as helping solve these crimes, and it's been a lot of fun for me. I've been able to do a lot of research. I've gone on some ghost investigations to get the feel of what that's like. I think I really believe that these are fiction, but I think that you've got to do your research to make it believable. You've got to have characters that people are going to read. Now, come on, that can't happen. That's, impossible. If you're writing pure fantasy, yes, of course. But being the fact that, these are real people that could actually have these abilities, they do ghost investigations, you've got to have some of that also be believable. So I try to do as much research as I can and pull that into my stories. And even though it is a series, they do kind of stand alone. You could pick up the second book and not be lost, So I try to keep that in the realm as well. And right now I'm working on the fourth book. It's back down in Sullivan's Island and a neighboring island as well, Folly Beach. And I've got that taking place right now, and I'm trying to get through that. I'm struggling here and there with some of it because I get pulled away in different directions. So, but I think by the end of the year, sometime in the beginning of next year, I should have that one out.
Wow. Well, I also think that's a fascinating thing is when you have a character that you get to develop over time.
Yeah.
It's
fun. It really is.
Yeah, it is.
And
it's a neat thing.
It's the same group of characters, too. This SIPS team is there, and they've all got their own quirky personalities, their own ways about them, but they come together, to do these investigations and then get pulled into these crimes. And, they're all able to unite as one, and it's so much fun doing that. And when I'm done writing, and I'm sure there's many writers that have said this, you miss them. It's kind of like,
yes.
I don't want to leave them.
Yes.
So that's probably why it's become a series. I didn't plan it that way with my first book.
Right.
But it kind of ended that way, and it was kind of like, wait a minute, I think I can carry this on, take them to different places. They can do investigations, and then you create this other mystery that's behind the scenes. And there's a little bit of romance, very not heavy, but, Marie's got some of that going on there, and I've kind of pulled all those elements together in it. And I've had a lot of people say that it's kind of a nice, quick beach read, that people enjoy.
Yes.
And
that's why some books do exist.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, it's great to be able to escape to another place.
Mm-hmm.
I get that from my girlfriend all the time. She goes, "Well, I want to get back up into the heavens."
Well, yeah, you do. It's funny. I've had some people say, "Well, where's the next one? I'm ready." It's kind of like, it's coming.
Well, the only thing is where I am now is book 4 goes into hell. She's one of the few who've read book 4. The publisher has it doing the edits, but there's going to be a few more that are still in hell. So we got to get through all of that process too, and But that's the fascinating thing about being able to do this is that you create your own universe.
Mm-hmm.
You get to play in these worlds.
Yeah, it is.
So, why don't you tell us where we can find your books and various websites where people can connect with you?
Okay. They all are now exclusively on Amazon, Kindle and paperback.
Okay.
My website, as you stated early, is robinmurphyauthor.com. The other side of me that I do is the rookiewritersSolutions.com, and that has my nonfiction book out there. It also has some tips on doing your self-edits, your query, self-publishing, your marketing tools. There's a lot of tips and links and helpful things out there to help anybody out there at any level. If you're just starting out, if you're somebody who's already published that maybe needs a little help on querying a publisher or an agent, we all hate writing those query letters. That's like the last thing you want to do. But if you end up not maybe being able to get published by a traditional publisher, then my book and tips and things are out there for self-publishing as well.
It's great. I'm sure that'll be very helpful. All right. Well, I am going to do my last minute spiel, and I will talk to you in a minute.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
For those listening, I want to say thanks to our-truth.com for broadcasting this show. You can find more information about me and my book series, The Archangel Jeremiel and The War to Conquer Heaven, at www.john-j-higgins.com, and also the website for this radio show, which is www.hangingwithhiggins.com. And with that, have a good night.